Good morning. I'm Hank Hyatt, Senior Vice President of Economic Competitiveness at the Greenville Chamber. Thank you for joining us today for a continuation of our Community Matters series. If you missed the first sessions, you can find the recording on the Greenville Chamber's website. Over the coming weeks, we'll continue to connect you with local leaders and experts to discuss issues that are top of mind right now. You can tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Learn more and register at greenvillechamber.org. A couple of housekeeping notes for today's session. All attendees should be on mute, and you're able to submit questions through the chat feature, and we'll get through those toward the end of our presenters' presentations. Today, we're very excited to hear from two experts in today's employment landscape. We have with us today Ashley Cutino. She's a labor and employment lawyer in Greenville and is a shareholder with Ogletree Deacons. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, she's been tasked to lead the unemployment advice group nationwide for Ogletree Deacons. We're also joined by Herb Dew, CEO of HTI. HTI has grown to become one of the largest human resource companies in the upstate, with the firm operating in 9 states with over 4,000 employees nationally. Good morning and welcome, Herb and Ashley.
Thanks for having us.
Morning.
So to provide a little data context to our conversation today, SC Dew released their initial claims for unemployment report just this morning, about an hour and a half ago. This week's report, week ending April 4th, indicated 85,018 individuals filed for unemployment benefits across the state for that week. Almost 10,000 folks were in Greenville County, and just eyeballing, it looks like there were about 25,000 claims filed across the upstate. So last week's report indicated about 65,000 people filing for unemployment and 31,000 the week prior. So we're seeing definitely an upward trend.
Yeah.
Very large numbers. Some folks will go back to work with their former employer and some will not. And in any event, business owners and employers are having to make tough decisions for their businesses and their employees. So what legal considerations do they need to take into account, and what strategic considerations should be top of mind for them? And so we're very glad to have you here today, Ashley and Herb, to talk about these issues. So Ashley, we'll start with you. Can we jump right in with an update from a legal perspective of what needs to be on employers' minds?
Yes, so I am going to share my screen. Can you now see my screen, Hank?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I'm going to quickly run through what has changed about unemployment so that you can get a real understanding of how a layoff or a furlough will impact your employees, which may help with some of your decision making as you're considering the loans that are available, the tax credits that are available to keep employees versus the unemployment that is available to impacted individuals. So very quickly, I just want to remind everybody that the base unemployment landscape has not changed. It's important to remember that unemployment is an insurance program that is funded by employers in conjunction with the state. You have base wage requirements, there are base look-back periods for eligibility. You also have to be able and available to look for work and take a job if it's offered, and you have to be unemployed through no fault of your own. We have seen some of these requirements change as a result of COVID-19, and some of them have not. It's also important to remember that the underlying purpose of unemployment is not now and never was to make someone whole because they're out of work. Now, with the additional CARES Act benefits, we are seeing some people made whole, but that was never the underlying intention, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. It's also important to keep in mind that unemployment is a joint relationship between the federal government and the Department of Labor and the states. So as you go through unemployment, you will see there being references to the states waiting on guidance from the DOL. That's because of this joint relationship between the state and the federal government as far as unemployment is concerned. So I want to jump in real quickly and talk about the additional unemployment benefit that the CARES Act is providing. First, it's expanding who is eligible for unemployment. Second is it is increasing the amount of benefit that is available for a short period of time. And third, it lengthens the amount of time that unemployment is available to impacted individuals. The overreaching goal of this is to get money into the hands of impacted individuals quickly. If you happen to be a nonprofit or a governmental agency, there is a change for you also. If you're a nonprofit or a governmental, you are probably what's called a reimbursable employer. That means that you don't pay into the system normally. Instead, you only reimburse the state government for your actual claims. The rate used to be a 100% reimbursement rate. That rate will now be dropped for you to a 50% reimbursement rate. Again, this only applies to certain nonprofit and governmental entities. So let's talk briefly about the big three changes that have happened. So first, unemployment for the state unemployment amount. You are eligible for an amount determined by the state. On top of that amount, you will now receive an additional $600. This $600 is added to your unemployment check. The impacted individual doesn't have to do anything to get this additional funding. This funding is available for 16 weeks and or through July 31st, whichever comes first. So this does have a limited time frame for when it will be available. Next, we have developed a brand new program for individuals who were not previously covered by unemployment, and we're going to talk about those details in just a second. Finally, in every state, an additional 13 weeks is going to be added to unemployment for a total of up to 39 weeks of unemployment. So let's break it down a little further. How is it going to cover people who were not previously covered? This impacts your independent contractors, your gig workers, your business owners, and your folks who are self-employed. If you were in one of those categories, you were not previously paying into the state unemployment system, so you were not covered by the state unemployment system. This new benefit plan is going to cover those individuals if they meet one of these criteria, which is essentially they're diagnosed with COVID-19, they have symptoms of COVID-19, someone in their house has COVID-19 or the symptoms, they can no longer work because they have children home from school or daycare, they're quarantined, or their place of business is closed. So think about all of the hairdressers that we go to. Their salons are now closed. They cannot work. This will now cover those individuals. Now, they will not be covered if they can telework and or if they're on some other type of paid leave. But again, this is a brand new system for people who were not previously paying into the insurance program, so there was no coverage for them. When we talk about the additional weeks that have been added, again, it's 13 weeks on top of whatever was previously available in your state. In South Carolina, we have a maximum of 20 weeks unemployment. So now impacted individuals will be eligible for up to 33 weeks. For those of you who are employers who are paying into the system, you are not paying for these additional weeks. This is covered by the federal government through the CARES Act. Again, there's an additional $600 that is available. That money is available on top of your state unemployment amount through July 31st. This is an exponential increase in the amount of money that employees in South Carolina can receive for those initial weeks. So if you're an employer, you are responsible for telling your employees that unemployment exists and for telling them how to apply. But it's real important that you understand that you should not be guaranteeing benefits or telling them what the amount is going to be or anything like that, because it is the state unemployment agency that actually decides all of that. And you may not know all of the other factors that are going into it, such as, is your employee driving Uber at night? Are they picking up some side job somewhere? So you need to be careful that you're not becoming the state unemployment agency, because they ultimately have the final decision. So here are a couple of examples for you on how unemployment is going to work in South Carolina. So again, in South Carolina, we have a minimum and a maximum for unemployment. Our average unemployment payout per week is $265, but you can make up to $326 a week. The way that is determined in South Carolina is they look at how much you make per week, they cut that in half, and then that is your weekly benefit amount up to a maximum of $326. So if we assume you're going to make the maximum of $326 a week, with the CARES Act, you're now going to receive $926 a week through July 31st. After July 31st, you're going to drop back down to that $326 or your individual weekly benefit amount for the remainder of the 33 weeks that are available in South Carolina. One question that we're getting constantly is, does that mean it's possible for impacted individuals to make more on unemployment than they would if they continued working? And that answer is yes. If an impacted individual is eligible for $1 in state unemployment benefits, they get the additional $600 on top of it. So the next big question we have is, can an employee quit just to get the additional unemployment benefits? And both the Department of Labor and the State Unemployment Agency have made it very clear that that answer is no. You have to have a reasonable basis for the quit is the only exception for you to be able to voluntarily opt out of unemployment. And what we're seeing is that reasonable basis that is determined by the unemployment agency. But essentially, it is if you are in a high risk category of individual, and or if you have some kind of hotspot at work and the workplace is not properly taking care of the issue. But generally speaking, you cannot quit just to get unemployment. So what should you do if an employee does quit? Well, in South Carolina, and this is on the DO website, there's what's called an offer of work form. You should fill that out so that the department understands that work is available. This is also true as we begin to open things up and you begin calling folks back. If you have work available and people don't want to come back to work, you should fill out this form so that DO understands that work is available. You should also contest the unemployment so that DO knows to make a determination as to whether or not the quit was or was not reasonable. And that burden is on the employee to prove it. Another question that we're getting a lot is, can you be eligible for unemployment if you're what's called partially unemployed? That means you're working a reduced hour schedule. And the answer to that is yes, but it's really a maybe. So if you're working a reduced hour schedule, you can get unemployment, but this is a matrix that shows you what happens. So what will happen is that the Department of Unemployment will look at a matrix and do an offset of how much unemployment you're eligible for based on how much money you're still earning in your reduced hours. And if you look at example 3 down in the bottom, you will see that if you are on a reduced hour schedule, but you are still making equal to or more than your weekly unemployment maximum, you are not considered to be unemployed. You are not eligible for any unemployment, and you will not get the $600. This example is actually in the DO FAQs, and they walk you through it. So if you want to look at it a little closer, you can do that on the DO website, and it actually walks you through this example in their FAQs that they have online. So this slide is actually incorrect because I had to give it to Hank before yesterday. So there is a rule that is generally applicable in South Carolina that if someone is on unemployment, they cannot get any kind of additional payment from the company, or they will not be eligible in that week. Yesterday at around 4:30, the governor actually issued an executive order that changes that rule. So now in South Carolina, an employer can give a special additional payment to an employee to help them while they're on unemployment if they so choose. However, the executive order did create 2 new qualifications for it and obligations for the employer. First, the employer would have to fill out a special form indicating that this payment is related to COVID-19. It is not intended to be a continuation of wages, that it is just an additional payment. And the employer is going to have to file that form and the unemployment on behalf of the employee. That is what yesterday's executive order did. Again, before the executive order, if you had made this kind of payment, the person would have been disqualified for unemployment in the week in which that amount was paid. Now with the executive order, that is no longer the case. One other important thing just to know and remember, fraud is a big deal in the unemployment arena. An employer nor an employee can lie to get benefits or to get into benefits to their impacted employees. If you do, there's an overpayment requirement. You have to pay it back. And also it actually could be a criminal prosecution and you'll no longer be eligible for unemployment benefits. Finally, it is very important for you to remember if you do have someone who's going out on a layoff or a furlough, you must give them notice that unemployment exists and how to apply for that unemployment. This can be done simply in your letter to them stating that unemployment does exist and then refer them to the due website. So I know that was really quick. We only have 30 minutes on this call, but those are the basics of unemployment in South Carolina and the basics of the additional benefits that you're going to get under the CARES Act.
So I'd like to remind everybody that you can submit questions through the chat feature. So if you have questions for Ashley, please go ahead and submit them and we'll take them in just a few minutes. I would like to go and turn the conversation over to Herb for a minute, if we may. From your perspective, Herb, what are some of the strategic considerations that employers need to have in mind as they decide on making furloughs, having layoffs, or other actions from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Hank. And Ashley, good summary. In fact, you answered one of my questions because the governor's announcement yesterday regarding the partial compensation was something we were talking about, you and I were talking about a couple of days ago. So let me share you what we did at HTI and then share some things I'm hearing from other major employers in the upstate. I think the way this legislation passed and what it did with the $600 short-term extension of unemployment benefits is what it essentially did was it for most people that their primary income is coming from you as an employer, that equates to an annualized income of $48,000, roughly $48,000 a year in South Carolina. We made the decision looking at that because we saw our business just plummeting like probably everybody listening, that we would go ahead and take advantage of that and that we would go ahead and really furlough every possible position we could with benefits continuation, really educate everybody as to why and help them apply for unemployment. But take advantage of this legislation because I think that this legislation and the increase, the $600 increase, gives companies sort of a pressure valve to go ahead and reduce compensation expenses in a given month to go ahead and help us get through certainly April and May. And then what we did at HTI, what we're doing is if somebody's above that $48,000 threshold, we're doing a return bonus when they come back to work to make them whole on whatever that salary difference was. So we may have somebody, for example, that has a base salary of $80,000. They're only going to get paid $48,000 or the equivalent of that, assuming they don't have other income. And so really we were able to very, very quickly, just in April, begin to ratchet down our compensation expense. And I think everybody saw the announcements that GHS went through. And then the announcements over the last couple of days, some of the automotive makers, I think, utilizing this unemployment benefit as a way for them to take advantage of this and reducing expenses and being healthy for return to work. Because I think all of us are trying to plan on coming back up to speed quickly when all this starts to bounce back. So I guess my challenge and my suggestion would be, even if you're a small company or a large company, is there an opportunity for you to go ahead and look at this and utilize this as a way to go ahead and furlough people, if you can, continue benefits, and then return them to work, and use that as an opportunity to go ahead and really reduce your expenses right now, so that you can make it through these next couple of months. Because I think it's fair to say we're probably going to have a May that's tough too, and then we really can't look past the next 30 or 60 days. So. Hank, I've heard a lot of companies begin to use this pretty heavily, and I think the large employers in the upstate that are beginning to furlough, understand this and understand that their people, in some cases, are making more money while they're furloughed than they would be working on a production line.
Gotcha.
That's actually an outcome. I think if you guys recall when you saw the two South Carolina senators, Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham, were trying to amend this. They didn't really want to see people make more than what they were making while they were working. I know in our case, we have an awful lot of our contract associates that actually make more now than when they were working. So that's going to be an interesting, I think it's important for us to call people back to work and make sure they understand that if they don't come back to work, that we can test unemployment. So they're just not living on that.
Right. And that form is, what is that form called again? Return to work, or is that right, Ashley?
Yes, it is. It is in the employer portal. It is actually called the offer of work form. It's UCB 261, and it is in the employer portal that employers can use. But what was just said is exactly right. What Herb said. We're seeing employers all over the upstate and actually all over the country do this exact same analysis. I do think it's important to remember that the CARES Act does provide tax credits for keeping your employees on the payroll.
Right.
There's a payroll tax, you don't have to pay it right now. And then, of course, if you're a small business and you applied for the PPP loan, there are incentives to either keep your people on the payroll or you've got to hire them back by a certain deadline. So people are kind of weighing the pros and cons for their individual businesses for that. But I think Herb's exactly right. I mean, if you're having to lay off folks, I think that there's a real math equation that you do, and you determine kind of who's not going to be hurt by unemployment other than the delay in filing.
Right.
And I will say, if you're doing a large number of like a mass layoff, South Carolina does have a program where you can file for unemployment on behalf of your employees. The reason that is really helpful is the way unemployment works is the individual has to file, then the unemployment agency has to confirm all of the information with the employer before they can pay out the claim. So if the employer files on the front end, it just takes out that whole middle step. And so once you actually get into the system, the payment is being made a lot quicker. Although I will say, doing this across the country, I know we've got a lot of frustrated individuals in South Carolina, but DO is actually doing an exceptionally good job compared to other states.
Right.
Going from just a few thousand claims to 85,000 claims in one, it boggles the mind that they can adapt so quickly to taking that as many claims as they're having to process. Is there a better way to approach it online or phone, or do you have any advice there?
So I know that people are frustrated and they're having trouble getting through on the phone. If you can do it online, they do have really good Q&As. Talk to your friends who've already gotten through the process, because it is an automated process. So all they're doing on the phone is kind of talking you through the forms. So if you can get through those forms on your own, it's an automated process. And we're actually really lucky that the state happened to have already upgraded their computer system in the last couple of years versus some states who are literally still operating on a DOS system in their unemployment plan.
Right. We also, I know on our site, we're going to put up some tutorials, because we've got 2,500 people in South Carolina that are being affected by shutdowns. So we've got tutorials, and I can send that to you, Hank, and you can post it somewhere.
Very good.
Walking people through simple tutorials on how to set up an account and different ways to go ahead and sort of, do things, so that somebody could watch a 20-minute tutorial that would help them out. And we can make that available to anybody who wants to watch it. So we got a lot of that. But, mostly patience and looking, getting online at sort of different hours. If you're like everybody else, 10 in the morning getting on there, you may find that it's slower. So try it at different times. But I agree with what Ashley said. SCDO is doing better because we operate in 9 states, and we have some states that are just getting crushed. And I think SCDO is being pretty responsive right now and trying to expand bandwidth and add phone lines and do all that stuff. So
let's say that we
whole country's dealing with it.
So in prior conversations we've had about this issue, we've talked about the difference between now and back in 2008 or so, and it feels a little bit different. It's tough times for a lot of different folks for a lot of different reasons. But it feels like there is an end to this, that this is a temporary situation. We'll get through this. But is there a message y'all would like to share? What's ahead? Message of hope, so to speak, from y'all's perspective.
From my, I look at it, obviously I'm employment facing, so I'm out in the market seeing what's happening out there. And I think we'll see a little bit of a slowdown, but I don't think as much as people anticipate. And I think companies have done a really good job, at least here in the upstate, and I can speak most clearly about that, to go ahead and take advantage of what they could now so that they can shut down for a longer period of time. And I think once we come back in May, I think things will pick up pretty quickly. Certainly on the manufacturing side, which is where I do most of my business. And so I guess my advice would be, stay safe. Don't be afraid. I think South Carolina's positioned itself really, really well. And I think employers have moved really quickly to do the things they needed to do. And just hang in there, take advantage. Ashley's educating people on all of these different acts that are coming out that help small and large businesses. So take advantage of those things. And I think, unlike 08, 09, that felt like it lasted 10 or 11 months, I think there's the opportunity for this to be something that feels better in 2 or 3 months, not back to normal. I think it's different. Mm-hmm. I think if we're open-minded, I think we'll be okay.
Ashley, do you have any comments on that front?
Yeah, and I do see a couple of questions, Hank. So I know one is about additional changes that are coming. So I know the chamber is doing a real good job of keeping people informed of changes that are happening. At Ogletree, we actually have a coronavirus resource center where if you go to our website in the far right corner, it says Coronavirus Resource Center. We have a constantly updating FAQ. We're doing blogs. We're doing free webinars for people really constantly. So there are a lot of free resources out there for you. So another question about the additional $600. So you have to be eligible for something in state unemployment to get the $600. You will not get a 600 on top of a 0. You have to be eligible for something in state unemployment to be eligible for the additional $600. Also, if you go to the DO webpage, I haven't been to it this morning, but I believe they still have up something that says that if your CARES Act, you can't apply yet. That's for the new program for your contract workers and your gig workers. If it's someone who's employed by a company, that portal is still the same portal and still open and operational. So don't be, that new hold is for this new portal that they're still building that wasn't in existence before. But from a place of hope, I'll agree with Herb again. So when we are talking to employers across the board, they are talking about furloughs and temporary reductions, not permanent, because everybody wants us to come back as quickly as they can. They're all trying to do the math to keep their companies afloat while doing the best thing that they can for their employees and trying to keep the everyone in the best position that they can. It's difficult for everybody. It's stressful for everybody. But I think if we can keep some perspective that if we're all safe and healthy, we're still winning in this scenario. I know in my family, we have a couple of folks that are, if they caught this virus, it would be very, very serious. So as long as you can give your family a hug, whether that be remotely or in person, we're still on the upswing on this thing.
Right.
Good. Well, I want to, we're right at 10:31 or so. So, and I don't see any other questions, at least on my end. So I want to thank our participants for logging in today. Thank Ashley. Thank you, Herb. This recording will be shared on the Greenville Chamber's website. And remember, this is part of an ongoing series. This Thursday at 10 a.m. On Thursday at 10 a.m., we'll be joined by Earl Gregorich and the SBDC to focus on options available to small business. It says Thursday, maybe Tuesday. Being in quarantine so long, the days kind of run together. But anyway, keep in touch with the Greenville Chamber. Look at our employer resource guide page, and everything will be available there for you. Thank you for your leadership, Herb. Thank you for your leadership, Ashley. Y'all do great work, and stay well and be safe. So thank you all.
All right. You guys too.
Bye-bye.